Allan Pinkerton was a hardcore Chartist. It was a massive, underground working-class movement in Britain. They demanded basic human rights, the right for a man to vote, regardless of whether he owned property, the right to a secret ballot. The British Crown viewed Chartism as absolute treason. They were terrified of a French Revolution-style uprising. And Pinkerton was not just some casual member. He was a militant organizer, orchestrating massive strikes and protests in the streets of Glasgow. In 1842, the government cracked down hard. They started rounding up Chartist leaders, throwing them in prison, or shipping them off to labor colonies in Australia. It was only a matter of time before a warrant was issued for Pinkerton's arrest. Allan had a fiancée, a Scottish folk singer named Joan Carfrae. They were married in secret on March 13th, but the word still got out. The police were closing in. With no time to celebrate and no time to pack, they were smuggled onto a ship bound for North America. But the escape did not go as planned. The weather, or maybe the Kraken, caused them to shipwreck on the jagged coast of Nova Scotia. They survived. They navigated the Great Lakes and eventually landed in the lawless, muddy frontier of Chicago. They settled in a quiet town called Dundee to lay low. Pinkerton needed to provide for his new wife. He asked the locals where he could find an abundance of straight-grained wood. He put away his radical politics and started building wooden barrels. To get the absolute best timber, Pinkerton would row a small boat out to Bogus Island. It was a heavily wooded, completely uninhabited stretch of land right in the middle of the Fox River. One afternoon, while chopping wood, he noticed something was wrong. The brush was trampled. There were drag marks from a boat. He found the remnants of a cold campfire. A normal citizen sees that and assumes it is just fishermen. But Pinkerton was not a normal citizen. He had just spent his youth surviving the British police. His ingrained paranoia flared up. He did not yell out. He did not go poking around in the daylight. His survival instincts took over. He waited until nightfall. He rowed his boat back out in the pitch black and literally crawled on his stomach through the tall river grass. He watched a group of men huddled around a roaring fire. They were operating a crucible and metal molds. They were manufacturing fake coins. Pinkerton did not crawl through the mud out of some noble desire to enforce the law. In the 1840s, America did not have a standardized paper currency. Frontier towns ran on a fragile mix of local coins. If a counterfeiting ring flooded Dundee with fake money, they would collapse the entire local economy in a week. If the merchants went bankrupt, they could not buy Pinkerton's barrels. If he could not sell barrels, his new wife would starve. These men were a direct, existential threat to his survival. Pinkerton silently backed away. He rode to the mainland and went straight to the Kane County Sheriff. The sheriff was so stunned by Pinkerton's scouting that he deputized the barrel maker on the spot. Pinkerton led a heavily armed posse back to the island, and they took down the entire gang. The town was ecstatic. A few weeks later, fake paper money started circulating in Dundee. The merchants did not even bother going to the sheriff. They went straight to Pinkerton's barrel shop. The suspect was a man named John Craig. But instead of kicking the door down, Pinkerton used the exact skills he learned as a hunted fugitive. He knew how to blend in. He knew how to lie flawlessly. Pinkerton approached Craig and completely gained his trust. He played the role of a greedy, corrupt local who wanted a piece of the action. He drank with him. He convinced Craig that he could help him pass a massive amount of fake bills. Pinkerton lured him into traveling up to Chicago for a massive money handoff. When Craig showed up with the counterfeit cash, Pinkerton dropped the act. The constables were waiting in the wings. They busted Craig red-handed. In that exact moment, the light bulb went off. Pinkerton realized a terrifying truth. The very skills that made him a wanted criminal in Scotland, the paranoia, the deception, the ability to seamlessly infiltrate a group, made him a lethal investigator in America. He put down his tools, he packed up his family, and he moved to Chicago. Let us pause for a quick station identification. The Mellow Cowboy Radio is a listener-powered frequency. You can quickly support this station by hitting the like button and dropping a comment to let me know exactly what state you are listening from. If you want to go above and beyond, hit subscribe. Now, let us get back to the program. But leaving the quiet woods of Dundee for the streets of Chicago was a massive shock to the system. Chicago in the 1850s was not a city. It was a gold rush of mud and corruption. The railroads were pushing west, the money was flowing in, and the local police forces were largely a joke. They were underpaid. They were easily bought. If a train was robbed, the local sheriff would stop at the county line. The criminals knew it. The massive corporate monopolies knew it. Pinkerton looked around and realized the entire system was rigged. Because of his success busting the counterfeiting rings, he was appointed as Chicago's very first police detective. But he quickly learned that working for a corrupt city meant playing by corrupt rules. He lasted 1 year before he walked away. He decided to build his own machine. In 1850, he founded the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. He did not just hire men with guns. He built a ruthless intelligence firm. He created a strict, uncompromising code of ethics to separate his men from the corrupt local cops. No taking bribes. No compromising with criminals. No working for a bounty. Clients paid a flat daily rate to ensure absolute objectivity. Pinkerton began building a massive intelligence network. He created the Rogues Gallery. He collected photographs, physical descriptions, and known associates of every major criminal. He combined this database with the newly invented telegraph system. If an express car was robbed in Ohio, Pinkerton knew about it in Chicago within the hour. His agents were relentless. They did not care about state borders or county lines. They answered only to the client's checkbook. His reputation exploded. The massive railroad monopolies realized that Pinkerton was the only man capable of protecting their wealth. He started taking massive contracts for the Illinois Central Railroad. He was recovering stolen payrolls, busting embezzlement rings, and crushing train robbers. This is where American history pivots. The Illinois Central Railroad had a brilliant, highly influential corporate lawyer on their payroll. A tall, lanky man from Springfield who handled the railroad's most delicate legal issues. This lawyer watched Pinkerton operate. He saw a man who could not be bought. He completely trusted Pinkerton's discretion. That corporate lawyer's name was Abraham Lincoln. Long before he was a president fighting a civil war, Lincoln was an attorney defending a railroad monopoly, and he knew exactly what Allan Pinkerton was capable of. But Pinkerton's agency was about to do something no law enforcement organization in history had ever done. In 1856, Pinkerton put an ad in the Chicago papers. He needed a new operative. A 23-year-old widow named Kate Warne walked into his office. Pinkerton assumed she was there to apply for a secretarial job, to sweep the floors or file the paperwork. Kate Warne looked him in the eye and demanded to be a detective. Pinkerton was stunned. In the 1850s, women did not hunt criminals. But Kate Warne understood something that the street-tough cops did not. She told Pinkerton that a woman could go places a man could never infiltrate. She could befriend the wives and mistresses of suspected bank robbers. She could sit in high society parlors, knitting quietly, while arrogant men bragged about their crimes. Men boast around women because they do not view them as a threat. Kate Warne weaponized their arrogance. Pinkerton hired her on the spot. She became America's first female private investigator, and she was utterly lethal. She adopted aliases. She changed her accent. She infiltrated secessionist rings and broke massive embezzlement cases by getting the wives of the thieves to confess their secrets over tea. She was so effective that Pinkerton put her in charge of the newly formed Female Detective Bureau. But her defining moment happened 5 years later. The year was 1861. The nation was tearing itself apart, and the threat of a violent assassination became very real. Lincoln did not turn to the government for protection. He turned to the barrel maker from Scotland. Pinkerton had uncovered a massive, heavily funded conspiracy to assassinate President-elect Abraham Lincoln in Baltimore. They had to smuggle Lincoln through hostile territory in the dead of night. Pinkerton did not trust his most heavily armed men with the president's life. He trusted Kate Warne. Warne disguised Lincoln as her invalid brother. She bribed the railway conductors. She secured a private sleeping car. And as the train rolled through the dark, surrounded by men actively hunting the president, Kate Warne did not close her eyes. She sat upright, armed and intensely focused, guarding Abraham Lincoln through the entire night. She delivered the president safely to Washington. She never slept. That level of obsessive, unrelenting vigilance became the absolute foundation of the Pinkerton machine. It was the inspiration that solidified the iconic logo, a stark, unblinking black and white eye, and the legendary motto born from the blood and sweat of a female operative guarding a president: "We never sleep." This was the absolute birth of the private eye. Let us pause for a quick station identification. The Mellow Cowboy Radio is a listener-powered frequency. You can quickly support this station by hitting the like button and dropping a comment to let me know exactly what state you are listening from. If you want to go above and beyond, hit subscribe. Now, let us get back to the program. 1861. The American Civil War erupts. The Union Army had cannons. They had thousands of soldiers. But they were entirely blind. The United States government had no formalized spy agency, no military intelligence. They were marching into the South with outdated maps and desperate rumors. They had no idea how many men the Confederacy had, or where they were marching. General George McClellan was notoriously paranoid. He believed he was vastly outnumbered by a phantom Confederate army. He realized you cannot shoot what you cannot see. He needed an intelligence network. He did not go to a military academy. He went to the man with the unblinking eye. Allan Pinkerton was hired to build America's very first formalized espionage ring, the Union Intelligence Service. It was the direct predecessor to the CIA. For a man who fled Scotland because he hated the government, Pinkerton was now the only thing keeping the American government alive. Pinkerton completely shed his civilian identity. He operated under the alias Major E.J. Allen. He did not use soldiers in uniform to gather information. He used the exact deep cover tactics that built his detective agency. He sent operatives deep behind enemy lines. They posed as wealthy Southern sympathizers. They bought drinks for Confederate officers in Richmond saloons. They measured the depth of wagon ruts in the mud to calculate the weight of enemy artillery. They counted campfires in the dead of night to estimate troop sizes. And Pinkerton tapped into an intelligence resource the Confederacy completely ignored through pure arrogance: enslaved people. Pinkerton actively recruited escaped slaves to return behind enemy lines. He hired a brilliant black operative named John Scoble. Scoble posed as a field hand, a cook, a deckhand. He infiltrated Confederate camps, secretly memorizing troop movements and supply routes. The Southern officers spoke freely in front of him, assuming he was invisible. These operatives provided the Union with the most lethal and accurate intelligence of the entire early war. But Pinkerton quickly learned that wartime espionage is not a gentleman's game. It is a meat grinder. He sent his top agent, a man named Timothy Webster, straight into the Confederate capital of Richmond. Webster was a brilliant operative. He did not just slip into the city, he became a trusted courier for the Confederacy. He was carrying official letters for Southern generals, while secretly passing their contents directly back to Pinkerton. He had successfully infiltrated the Confederate War Department itself. But the stress of the deep cover broke his body. He fell severely ill with rheumatism and was bedridden in a Richmond hotel. Pinkerton lost contact. He panicked. The Scottish barrel maker, who survived by being aggressively paranoid, made a fatal mistake. He let his personal attachment override his operational security. He broke his own protocol. He sent 2 other agents into Richmond just to check on Webster. Those agents were recognized, captured, and interrogated. To save themselves from the gallows, they broke. They gave up Webster's identity. In 1862, Timothy Webster was dragged from his sickbed. He was tried for treason. Confederate President Jefferson Davis personally ordered the execution, and Webster became the very first American spy to be executed by hanging. Pinkerton was completely devastated. The unblinking eye had blinked. He realized that he was no longer just hunting bank robbers or protecting rich men's railroads. He was orchestrating a shadow war that cost innocent men their lives. He felt personally responsible for the blood on the gallows. He continued to run the intelligence ring until General McClellan was removed from command. Exhausted by the meat grinder, and out of fierce loyalty to the general, Pinkerton refused to work for his replacements. He resigned and walked away. When the Civil War finally ended, the government disbanded his intelligence network. The nation was supposed to heal. The guns were supposed to go quiet. But men who learn how to kill in the dark did not simply go back to farming. The violence did not stop. It just moved west. The railroads began aggressively pushing into the lawless frontier, carrying millions of dollars in untraceable payroll and gold bullion. And a new breed of outlaw was waiting for them: hardened Confederate guerrillas who refused to accept the surrender. Men like Jesse James. The massive corporate monopolies realized the local sheriffs were completely outgunned. They did not just need a few detectives anymore. They needed an army. Allan Pinkerton took the ruthless espionage tactics he perfected in the Civil War, and he weaponized them for the highest bidder. He transformed his detective agency into a private, heavily armed corporate military. When a private company has more spies and more guns than the federal government, who is actually writing the laws? If you want to hear exactly how the unblinking eye waged a brutal, bloody proxy war against the James Younger gang in the Wild West, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you do not miss the next chapter, and leave a comment down below telling me if espionage in war is ever truly justified.